we don't have a culture. Black Americans or people across worldwide don't have a culture. How's it going, Lucas? I agree with a lot of your topics, but for this one, I do disagree with the interracial aspect, and I think I disagree with some of the points you were making on your video. I think that you didn't really, I think you failed to actually bring up you failed with your analogies in terms of disagreeing with Umar Johnson. You stated that one of them was that when he talked about 70% of black women were not married, and you basically gave the concept, you put it in concept instead of disagreeing with that. You said that you don't like how white ignorance or white people use statistics, but the statistics still stand for the fact that 70% of black women are unmarried. Whether the context of it is true, that that part of the reason can be because many black women are disagreeable or hard to marry, can be that fact, but still 70% of black women is a problem.
No, it's not a problem. It's not a problem with black men. That has nothing to do with me.
Well, I would say it does. I say that it does have to do with black men because I believe that black men and black women should be married.
Wait, how does far as that have to do with the black man? A single black man?
Well, collectively, it does. If you want to talk about it isolated,
even collectively, how does that have to do with me as a black man?
Well, for cultural aspects, black people are culturally confused and have identity issues, and they need to marry with one another in order to establish a culture.
You brought up as far as the 75% or whatever black women who won't marry. How does that have to do with me as a black man?
Well, because I believe black people should be married. Together. They should marry
here's
one
the thing.
another.
I disagree with that. Just because they are black does not mean they should marry one another. Because there are a lot of women who should not be married. There are a lot of men who should not marry because they're not going to be good fathers and they're not going to be good mothers. So this concept of you should marry a black woman just because they're black or you should marry a black man because he's black, no.
Well,
that's how we got to this issue as is. Because these women kept open their legs for the wrong black man or the wrong man in general. And now that's why they're single, which now results in their loss of attraction in the marketplace of getting married by over 50%. That has nothing to do with me. I didn't sleep with them. I didn't have a baby by them and then just leave them be. That has nothing to do with me.
Okay. Well, I understand all that. I understand that the black community has many flaws and the black community has issues with marriage and whatnot, but I'm talking collectively.
No, we don't have any problem with marriage. What we have a problem is with black women who can't close their legs. That's what it seems to be.
Well, it takes two to tango, so we know that.
I agree it takes two to tango, but here's the thing. It wasn't single black men, right? It was single black women. Black men already know that there's trash dudes out there. We don't hang around them. So what we need to figure out is what is causing black women to keep reproducing with trash dudes who leaves them high and dry.
Okay, you're speaking from an aspect of a isolated lifestyle, which is a culture like an American culture. It's because we don't have a culture. Black Americans or people across worldwide don't have a culture. So we're not interconnected.
What do you mean black Americans don't have a culture?
We don't have a real culture. And I'm a black American. I'm African American.
I'm not even going to argue that point. But let's say I can see that point. We don't have a culture. What does that have to do with 75% of black women not being married?
Well, because they have identity issues. We don't have rituals and ceremonies that are based on what to do in order to get married. We don't have arranged marriages.
What identity issues have to do, what identity issues as far as explain the 75% of black women who are not getting married?
Okay. We don't have a concept of getting married because we don't have a concept of marriage, of our own rituals and ceremonies and customs. We are following based off of a destructive culture.
What do you mean black people don't have a culture of getting married and having children? What are you talking about?
we are following based off of you even said yourself that we follow your white culture, European culture, right? Our marriage.
No, I don't recall saying that. No, I say as far as when it comes to hip hop and whatnot, that culture has been bastardized, and it's been bastardized for monetary gain.
Okay, I heard you say that in a lot in your live streams, that you would say that black people black people follow in the footsteps of white culture. You even say like homosexuality.
Those words have never came out of my mouth.
I heard you say that, but okay.
You've never heard me say that. What I've always referred to as far as the culture has been bastardized, that the culture that we have presently is not ours, that it's theirs.
Exactly.
That's not the same thing, bro. What I'm talking about is a culture of degeneracy that they supplanted with our culture. That's not the same thing.
Look, what I'm saying is black people are actually confused. Because we don't have a culture, we have an identity crisis. I
get what you're saying, the identity crisis due to lack of culture. How does that explain? As far as the women who keep opening their legs to dudes that aren't going to be husband material.
Well, for example, so it's like the notion is that black people don't have a father in their household, right? So they can't teach the idea, the theory, they teach discipline. They can't teach, or the fact that black people already dysfunctional households.
But I disagree with the premise, right? Because the premise is flawed from the jump. Because what you're suggesting or what you're assuming is that if there was a man in the household, things would be going differently. That's
okay.
I'm
just using an example. I'm not trying to speak to that specifically. I'm just saying that basically there's a lot of dysfunction in black households, and it's been this way for a long time, even since Jim Crow and slavery. No matter what Thomas Sowell has said.
I hear you, but what is that? You're trying to explain the 75% who aren't getting married.
Yeah, I'm trying to tell you right now. Yeah, I'm trying to tell you. So they have sex. So they do things irresponsibly. It's because they don't have a culture. They don't have discipline. They don't have the village in order to protect our women or to be able to showcase what to do or how to get a man or how to get married. We don't have arranged marriages.
Wait, so you're telling me that black women are just stupid? That's what you're telling me?
No, they're exploited. And in many ways, black people are pitiful. So yes, in many ways that we are pitiful. We are pitiful in many ways. How we live. To keep it a buck with you, to keep it real, we are.
How are we pitiful? And what is, as far as black women? What does the culture have to do with knowing that? I would assume that every black woman and every black man understands that. Hey, upon her getting pregnant, a baby forms. What does it have to do with anything? Regardless of whatever culture you may have or lack, that's 1 + 1 = 2. That's common sense.
Well, a lot of people do things, even though that common sense is not really common sense. So they tend to do things that hurt themselves, that put them in a situation because they have emotional problems. So that has nothing to do,
that's completely separate from any lack of culture or whatnot.
It absolutely does, because when you have a strong culture, when you have a strong foundation, it's like the same thing. When the nation is strong, it's based on the black family. When that is strong, then the people will be strong. When the families are strong in the village is strong, the nation is strong. And that is based on the culture of the people. And since black people don't have any culture, they have an identity crisis and they follow the footsteps of the oppressors. That makes it very difficult for them to be able to be controlled and responsible of their very livelihood. We're not very responsible of our livelihood because we are people that live in pitiful situations. Majority of it. How are
black people not responsible for their livelihood? I don't understand. I don't get what you're trying to say. You're trying to say black Americans don't have a culture, and due to the lack of culture, that's what's causing as far as black women not getting married?
Okay, would you agree that black people are oppressed, right? Based on the system of white supremacy?
Sure.
Okay. If you agree to that, then a people that is not free or that are in bondage based on mental slavery, you cannot be a people that is in bondage and practice your culture at all times. You cannot do that. That's an oxymoron. That's idiotic. You only practice your culture if you're free. You're free from the mental bondage of your oppression.
It depends on the level of oppression, right? And where it pervades.
Well, we are heavily oppressed. I mean, there's not one form of activity you can tell me where we're not oppressed. We're oppressed in the medical system.
But nothing's gonna stop me from raising my child how I want them to be raised, or me getting with a woman that I want to get with.
Maybe it's your concept of what you think it is, that nothing is stopping you. Maybe it's preventing you because you. And I'm not trying to speak to you about you personally like that, but from my perspective, many Black people such as yourself and I have cultural identity issues. So we do not have a concept of how to really raise our child. Like many Black people raise their children by just placing them in front of the television. So like,
what is this based off of?
What are you talking about? Have you ever been? Have you ever? Okay, you have a Black family. You don't know anybody to do that?
No, that raise their child by putting them in front of the television? No.
There are a lot of Black people that do that. There are a lot of Black people that don't care about their children, that let them.
You're gonna have to give me some data to back this up, because I don't know anyone who's doing that.
You don't know. You don't have to anybody that's doing that. You can literally go in the street. You can interact with people in the streets. You can interact with some family members that do stuff like that. They don't care about their children. They even smoke weed with their children and stuff like it's a lot of stuff happening.
Sure, there may be segments within the community that possibly do that, but that's not a representation of the whole or even the majority.
I'm not saying that. My point is that there's no culture, so we do not have a culture where each of us are raising our children by the same method. We have different methods, which causes confusion. And so that's what my aspect of saying that culture.
That's a separate issue as far as from Black women getting pregnant and not getting married.
Well, it's a holistic. You have to be able to take it in. That's why they're not married, is because Black people have an issue with each other in terms of, you're looking at it from a isolated perspective, like, oh, that Black woman, she decided to hoe around, or she decided to open her legs and have a baby out of wedlock. That's not my problem. But I'm saying, of course, it wouldn't be your problem from an isolated situation, but it affects us as a people. It affects us in the way how we are perceived and how we look things. Okay,
no, I agree with that as far as that existing within the community being problematic. But that problem there is not my problem. I didn't tell her to do that.
Of course, you didn't tell her to do that.
So that's the issue that I'm having as far as with Dr. Umar. That has nothing to do with my decisions and who I marry, because there are Black women who are unmarried and who have children and whatnot.
Well, I could say the same thing in regards to, there are white women that are unmarried. There are Asian women unmarried. Of course, there are women of every race that are unmarried. But that's not the argument Dr. Umar was making. Dr. Umar was making is that you should not, as far as interracially married, due to the fact that 1 out of 3 Black women aren't going to get married. Okay, I see what you're trying to say. I see what you're saying, and maybe from what my angle was, I was taking the perspective of, you were saying that using numbers and stuff. Okay, I can agree with that. Maybe it was the fact that how I viewed the video. I see what you're saying on that. But I'm that in regards that Black people collectively are definitely affected by racism and white supremacy. And because so we don't have a culture, we are affected by it. But I just wanted to move on to the next thing since that we moved on from that. I didn't like that or agree with the fact that you had generalized the whole African thing, where you said that the slave trade, and I know you weren't trying to demean like the slave trade, but you were saying that people, if they come from a lineage of murder, rape, and pillage and all that other stuff, well, why should you be dating Africans? And it kind of generalized the situation, because if you want to be honest, many of those countries are not really the same years and like hundreds of years ago. Like those countries are not really in existence anymore, and some of those tribes as well. And so you kind of generalize the situation like it was just an African thing, but it is an insult if you were to think about the fact that a Black person would be with a white person, knowing that the history, that the relationship white people have with Black people. We know that through
so that by the same logic, warfare, why would I be with an African woman, or why do I want someone to be with an African man? Because he didn't make it as far as lineage. As far as made it a race thing. As far as the entire race is held responsible. And if that's the case, well, then the entire race would be held responsible for me being here in the country in the first place.
Well, it's different because the relationship with white people and black people have never really coexisted to be something that was good. Like all throughout the history,
I'm not talking about the nuance, because he wasn't being nuanced with what he said.
So you're arguing about the fact of him generalizing things, is that what you're saying?
That's what he did.
Okay, all right. So
by that logic, you wouldn't get with an African.
Well, I can't really agree with that.
How can you not agree with that? He said you shouldn't get with a white person due to their history, due to their lineage of oppressing, subjugating, whatnot, pillaging, raping, yada yada. So by that logic, I would only want to get with a black American woman. I wouldn't get with an African woman.
Well,
because they have a history of selling us to Europeans and the Arabs.
Well, technically, you wouldn't have to get with Africa. I mean, you can. I'm not saying
you would have to. I'm saying I would not. Just like I wouldn't get with the white woman, I wouldn't get with an African woman.
Well, that's pretty difficult because we don't know those countries. We don't know many of those tribes.
That's the point that I'm making. That's not the point that he made. He made he made a blanket statement as far as all white people due to the history. So you would have to apply that to all groups, which would include Africans.
I see your point. All right. Well, I wanted to say that there was other things that I disagreed with. I don't think that when you were talking about marrying John Brown compared to like you're giving examples of things that were like outrageous. It's kind of disingenuous. You were saying that I'd rather have my daughter. Well, you were saying I'd rather have my daughter
go with someone who is an abolitionist as opposed to someone who's a Sambo.
Well, you can always. The thing is that a black, depending upon how Sambo a black person is, they can always change and make better for themselves as black person.
What? So you would want your daughter to get with a Sambo in hopes of him changing?
I'm not saying that.
Hold on, no, I know that's not what you're saying, but that's what you're arguing for.
No, it's outrageous. See, my argument is the fact that I don't think that black people should be with white people no matter what, based on cultural concept. Excuse me. And so you're insinuating that.
Wait, how can you say? Wait, I'm lost. How can you say they shouldn't be on with white people or non-black people due to culture when you just a few moments said that we don't have a culture and the culture that we have is white people, is white culture?
Explain that. Yeah, I can explain that. I would say that it's because we have to establish a new one. We have to be able to create one in order to.
So what would preclude you from creating that new culture with a non-black person then?
Well, because cultural confusion, an identity crisis. Because also when you have sex with someone that is a non-black person, it influences the way that you think about a person or think about your culture. So, for example...
Wait, no. Hold on. You're saying if you have sex with a person, it influences the way you think about a culture. If you have a culture, but you're saying black people don't have a culture, that we would have to create a new one. So I'm asking you, if we have to create a new one, how would that as far as stop someone or thwart someone from getting with a non-black person and creating this new culture for black people?
Right. So what I'm saying, it furthers that confusion with black people. That's what it does. It furthers that confusion.
What confusion? What are you confused about?
We are already confused as a people, so it furthers that confusion when you're sleeping with people that is not going to be for the.
So two confused people are going to create another culture? That doesn't sound like a culture that's going to be very promising then.
Okay, I see what you're trying to do, and you're trying to say that two people are creating a culture. Look, the point is, of course, that black people are already confused within themselves, right? But in order to establish a culture, they have to be able to do that on their own. They have to be able to...
But how are two confused people going to establish anything, culturally speaking?
Well, you have to be able to create. You have to be able to analyze and create it. That's all you have. That's all.
But they're already culturally confused. So what are they going to be analyzing and creating?
Well, they have to alienate themselves from white supremacy. They have to alienate themselves from white culture.
How do you alienate yourself from white supremacy? Let me know, because that sounds like a very good plan of attack. How do you alienate yourself from white supremacy?
Well,
because that would defeat the purpose of it being white supremacy.
Well, in order to alleviate white supremacy, if you read some of the
is not stopping, though. That's lessening the damage.
Completely stopping white supremacy. If you look at some of the works of Neely Fuller Jr., he talks about black people have to be on some type of code, and so when they are on some type of code, then they can look to I
agree as far as a type of code, but how are two black people with no culture who are also confused culturally going to establish a code that benefits them culturally?
When they see racism, when they're able to identify the issues of black people and understand that the dominant being is white people, right? Then they're able to understand and look at all areas of activity and see what's wrong and what they must not do, and replace all those issues with the purpose of seeking justice.
Gotcha.
So when they look at
so let me get this straight: the people who are culturally confused, who have no culture, have the wherewithal to see another culture and see white supremacy and analyze it and see what they need to do and what they don't need to do, and then build a new culture from this analysis. But these same people don't have the understanding or the competence to do that with a non-black person.
No, you're rewording kind of like what I'm trying to go for. No, see, the purpose, when you do it with a non-white person, it only furthers the confusion. Because when you think of white supremacy, you think of the fact that white people are dominant over you. And when you're dominant over you, you're only insulting yourself as a person.
So well, strategically speaking, wouldn't the best option then to be with a white person if you're trying to defeat white supremacy, because they would know as far as the ins and outs of white supremacy?
Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. Not to say no. That's to say that white people knows the ins and outs of white supremacy, because white people are very ignorant of some of the things that they do within their own culture. So we can't look for them to be able to have a stop from practicing this way of living. We can't look for them in that aspect. We have to be able to do it on ourselves. Only we are created to create. We have the creativity to do that ourselves. They don't have the creativity to do it for us, and they're not going to.
How do they not have the creativity to do that, but they manage to somehow create a system in which now we have to combine heads to get out of?
They created a system.
So there has to be some level of creativity present.
I'm not saying that white people are that do not have creativity. I'm saying they don't have the creativity and they're not willing to be able to get us out of the oppression. Their only method would be to integrate. Integration will only be the method of being for white people to make things better for black people, but not to completely withdraw from white supremacy. The only way from white supremacy is for black people to separate and have their own community and do for self. That's the only way. It's what many of the black scholars have talked about. Gotcha. Many of the black scholars.
So we have to come together and create our own culture and figure out.
This is not to say that no other race of people can't be allies or anything like that. I'm saying that you should not be willing to want to integrate and want to marry, because that will only further the confusion. Black people have to be able to create their own communities, have to create their own schools and their own.
Before we get into the communities, right? Before we get into the communities and schools, stuff like that, we need a culture. So we need to create a culture.
Yes, and then with that culture,
that
you
comes
have to
first.
be able to. Yes. But as we learn and as we develop this culture, as we probably take messages from history of what Black people used to practice, and we have to be able to develop a new one, because that old culture that we did got us in some of the issues that we are in now. So that's what my method, or I believe the best method, would be. And so that's why one of the reasons,
in order to create this culture?
It could take, some people say hundreds of years. It could take before Black people are actually free, okay? And I'm not talking about Black Americans specifically. I'm talking about Black people in general, because Black people are suffering everywhere, no matter what. And they are culturally homeless everywhere, even including Africans. I don't care what anybody says.
Africans are culturally homeless.
Absolutely. You see how many Christians are Africans, okay? Nigerians weren't calling themselves Nigerians 500 years ago, okay? So I don't... And so, like that, I'm not with the whole talking about who has a culture and who doesn't. You know what I'm saying? So, saying that in my regards that I don't believe that Black people should be race mixing. I don't think Black people, especially if you're pro-Black, I think that that's one of the worst things that you can do that can cause confusion.
Gotcha. And this culture is going to be established within a few hundred years.
Yeah, because I don't believe, like you said, that you believe that Black people are going, Black Americans are going to be extinct in the next 5 years. I really don't think that Black people have the capability of being able to make things better for themselves in the next 5 years like that. It's too many issues. We have too many problems that's going on.
So what exactly is going to change within these hundreds of years?
They have to get on code. That's all you can do. They just have to be able to get on code. I mean,
now, how does that happen, though?
Well, you have to get the information out there. Many people, you have to be able to inform them. You have to be able to show an example of a prospering Black, pro-Black couple or a pro-Black family. You have to be able to show some examples, and you have to be on code with that. Otherwise, that if they see a Black person with a white person, they cannot see that within themselves. I mean, you can give example of someone like Sidney Poitier. You use an example, it's about the mindset. Yes, like someone like Sidney Poitier had Black people. Even though he was married to a white woman, he helped Black people get into the movie industry. But his viewpoints was limited because he had an integrationist mindset. And integration will not help Black people. And as long as we're trying to integrate with white people or any other race of people, we will be let down. We will fail.
So can you give me an example of another group that does this?
Well, they don't have to. Many of them don't.
So we're the only group that's we're going to be the guinea pigs then.
What do you mean guinea pigs?
Maybe we're going to be the first group because no one else has done this.
Yeah, we're the only one because, I mean, Black people have the ability to do it. I mean, like, as they say, like, Black people are the greatest influencers. They're able to create many things. So why don't they be able to do that themselves? If we're the first to create dances and all this other stuff, and culture and math and all this other stuff, then we should be able to do it. We have to pull ourselves up and do it on ourselves. So that's what my take on that. We can do that. And I don't believe that it's going to take a measly 5 to 10 years or in my lifetime, which I feel like I'm being real on that. I don't think that it'll take in a lifetime to do it. I mean, you could just see on the internet, like the amount of problems that we have. We are pitiful. We can't be a people that claim to be free and culture and all this other stuff, and at the same time down on our luck based on genocide. We are a people, especially even in America. Our culture is based on the market. It's not based on something that we've been doing for the last few hundred years. And I know this is off topic, but we had afros in the 70s, Jerichos in the 80s, 90s, high fades and stuff like that. It changed based on whatever the market is. So we have to change our way of living. We have to change the fact that many of the all areas of activity, including politics, education, sex, health, all that stuff, we have to really change that. So,
gotcha.
And it's gonna take some time.
Fair enough, my guy. Well, I appreciate the call.
Okay, have a good one, Lucas. Thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem.